It was at that point that the door to the training room opened, and in walked a somewhat tall gentleman, a bit slender. So, I'm finally going to meet this individual that I'm supposed to fight. I was told it would be a challenge like none other, he said, looking to the man escorting him into the room. This had better not be a waste of my time, he said, as his eyes started to take in the room itself, eventually falling on Delius and Asa, standing towards the center of the room, whilst numerous scientists were on the outlying edges, with various amounts of equipment. For a moment, he had to take a hard second look at Delius. No, that's not possible. Is that who I think it is? Yes, it is, Master Bawa. I would like you to meet Delius, the hereforetold champion of the gods. For a moment, he stood there aghast, his eyes wide as he stared at Delius, before a smile grew on his face. You know what? I take it back. I'm no longer worried that this will be a disappointment, he said as he began to approach Delius, still with a bright smile on his face. It is an honor to meet you, Delius. I have seen you on television many times. It's nice to meet you too. Bawa, right? You're a master of one of the foremost forms of martial arts on this planet, right? Yes, that is correct. I am actually the reigning martial arts champion, undefeated 6 years running. Well, from one warrior to another, I give you my regards, Mr. Bawa. Quite frankly, I've found that my interest in these martial arts has been piqued. I've been doing a little bit of research on it, the focusing techniques, utilizing body movements, specific training methods in order to maximize combat capability, and the many other aspects of martial arts. So naturally, when I wanted to start training, I asked them to find me the best martial arts expert they could. But I don't want you to get confused. We're not actually going to be fighting. Pardon me? Bauer replied. If we're not going to be fighting, then why am I here? Well, I needed a standard, someone to measure myself against when it came to confrontation with people from the outer worlds. I need to know that I can stand against anyone, that I'm prepared to deal with it. So, as this training, you'll be attacking me with basically everything you have. No holding back now. My objective in this bout, shall we call it, isn't to actually beat you. It's simply to dodge you, make sure that I can keep up and move, and change my rhythm and movements appropriately for a fight, because I'm going to need to be able to fight people, but I won't be making any strikes. You see, I have this sort of thing where I don't want to kill people that I might like. Well, don't you have a high perception of yourself? I had come to believe that you weren't one for ego, that you were modest, if anything. Oh, don't get me wrong, Bawa. This isn't a matter of ego. In fact, I thought this sort of issue might come up in conversation when dealing with another warrior such as myself, someone who prides themselves on their combat capabilities. As such, I brought a demonstration to explain why I'm not going to be making any strikes. Hey guys, Delia said, waving to a few of the scientists outside of the main training area. Could you bring that over here? Yeah, the sample I asked for, he said, waving at them, as one of them separated himself from his current task to walk over to a mechanical lifting device made to lift large objects that seemed to have a large black cube loaded onto it. With the press of a button, the device began to levitate, lifting just off of the ground, and the man began to move the lifting device towards the center of the ring, bringing it right beside Delius and his new associate Bao, with Asa standing quite nearby. Okay, so Asa, what did you say this stuff is called again? It's called Marikite. It's the same stuff that we make the probes that we send to your home planet out of, except we simply coat the exterior of our probes with it. It's exceptionally heavy. But, as part of its perks, if you flow a current of energy through it, it becomes gravity nullifying, nullifying all gravitational effects. Yeah, Asa, but that's not really the part that I was wanting you to explain. Oh, of course, Asa replied, with a bit of a chuckle, as she adjusted her glasses somewhat. As well as having that advantage, it's also one of the 12 hardest substances that our race has discovered. The pounds per square inch of force it takes to damage this metal under any circumstances is absolutely extraordinary. This large block of it is actually capable of withstanding a force greater than we can actually measure. Quite frankly, we don't have any sort of press capable of generating enough force to damage it, so we don't know how high the threshold is. But our highest level press zeroes out at about 400 tons of pressure per square inch, and that can't put a dent in it. Yes, what an impressive block, Bawa said, looking over to Asa. And the point of this is, he said, a bit condescendingly. Just watch, Mr. Bawa, Asa said, as Delius walked over to the sphere sitting on the lift pallet. With no effort whatsoever, he bent down and picked up the large block, each side of the block being about 2 foot in length. There he stood back up, holding the block aloft with a single hand. Yes, that does look quite heavy, and you lift it with such ease. Am I supposed to be impressed? Bawa said, looking at Delius holding the block. Oh, this isn't the show. This is, Delius said, as he placed his other hand on the other end of the block and began to apply pressure to it. As he did, a loud sound began to emanate through the room, the sound of warping metal, as the block, a solid black obsidian color, began to contort and warp out of shape, bending and folding in on itself, as Delius applied pressure, crushing his hands in towards each other. The black obsidian block beginning to look somewhat like Play-Doh in his grasp, as suddenly a red glow began to emit from the block, what looked like spider hair fractures of this red glow, spreading out through its warped and twisted form. And in the moment, there was a gust of wind and a burst of noise that was almost ear-shattering. As for whatever the reason be, the block simply snapped, breaking apart into a scattering of pieces that clattered to the floor with heavy bangs, the corners and edges of these blocks emanating red light and heat. So much heat that the padding on the floor began to catch fire. As quickly a group of men ran up with extinguishing devices, beginning to spray down the area. As Bawa stared in complete and utter astonishment, and Delius simply shook his hands off and began brushing them, as if he was simply trying to get the material out of his fingers, like there were shavings of dust he was simply trying to remove. And that, Mr. Bawa, Delius said, looking back up towards his new sparring partner, That is why I'm not going to be hitting you. You see, I have this funny little thing where I want you to live, and I'm not quite sure I could hit you without killing you. I'd kind of like to perfect it before I even think about hitting anyone. But for that, I need more experience. And that's where you come in, Mr. Bao. So tell me, do you think you can help?